What's going on, everybody? It's Griffin Steinfeld here. Today I am belting up in the 1966 Chevelle, getting ready to have some fun. This car, believe it or not, was a Christmas present to my dad from my mom about, 13 years ago, and progressed into a monster. The motor is a 377 cubic inch Dart little M block, topped with a set of AFR 220 cylinder heads, custom spec John Doherty racing cam in it, and the star of the show is the all billet 671 blower shop supercharger. All the injection timing is controlled by Holley EFI, and air is let in by a huge bug catcher scoop. And let me tell you, that is the craziest thing in the world to tune. That scoop is so temperamental because it has three 3¼ inch throttle blades. And what that means is a tiny little crack of the throttle means all three of those move at the same time. That means 5% throttle is all the air in the world. So this thing is super touchy, super twitchy, and it's just pissed off. This car just wants to go fast. So without further ado, let's fire this thing up, go take it for a little cruise, and I'll talk about what it's like to drive this thing. So this car started life with a bone stock 350 crate motor. And we had it like that for probably, pretty much the entire time we owned it up until 2 years ago. A couple years ago, my dad told me one day, I want to race the Chevelle. Let's go take this thing to the track. And I said, absolutely, I'm down, but we're not going to take it like this. Not with a stock motor. I don't know, 4-speed, manual. So from that day on, this car started to become a race car. Right before we planned on taking this car to the racetrack, we had the supercharger on it, we had the fuel injection on it, so we decided to take it to the dyno. That didn't turn out so well. On the third or fourth pull, I broke 6 of 8 pistons in this motor. We kind of knew we were on borrowed time to begin with because we had no idea who had built the motor. It had been in the car for years and years and ran good, but was just never set up for boost. So after absolutely destroying the stock motor, we pulled it apart, found all the issues with it, and built up this motor that's in the car now. This motor is a badass little motor. It's pissed. This car should make as much horsepower as the supercharger can support. This 671 supercharger will support around 800 to 900 flywheel horsepower. It's pretty good. Relatively small blower. And I say that compared to the newer TVS Roots blowers, the Whipple superchargers, the centrifugal blowers. This is the old school blower. They're not efficient at all. They create a ton of heat. And I'm going to tell you how I fight that heat. Since this motor is non-intercooled, the way I fight the heat is E85. E85 is injected above the supercharger. So the supercharger has to pull air and fuel in. And what that does is completely cools the air charge right before it hits the supercharger rotors. When it cools the air down, it cools the rotors down, thus making more power. This car has Viking coilovers up front and Viking shocks in the rear. It has no sway bar in the front, Hotchkiss the sway bar in the rear, and just a good old alignment. Other than that, it's completely stock. This car has ridiculous amounts of throttle response. I'm talking you barely tap the gas pedal and it wants to rev to like 4,000 RPM. That's how touchy this thing is. And that is because of that big 3-blade throttle body setup we have on top of the supercharger. This car gets nothing but crazy looks from people. It's the funniest thing. If you go through a parking lot or a crowd of people like at a car show, they either love it or hate it. It's the funniest thing. They give you a dirty look, or they smile and laugh and get their phone out and take pictures. The transmission in this car is also fairly cheap budget build. It's a 4L80E 4-speed, and it is pretty much completely stock with the exception of a shift kit and a GM late model input shaft. The late model input shafts were a little bit stronger than the early ones. This transmission is out of an early Suburban, I believe. So this thing is pretty stout. We have yet to have any transmission issues, and it just keeps taking all the abuse. This car hasn't been to the racetrack yet. We plan on taking it right in the new year, 2019. That's going to be the year for this car. We plan on doing a lot of racing with it, especially when my truck comes out. We're going to have both cars at the track. It's going to be a good time. Now this shifter is a little bit of a handful, no pun intended. This transmission has a manual valve body in it, and the torque converter lockup is on a manual switch as well. So you got to understand how and when to shift it, how and when to lock and unlock the torque converter. And that can get a little confusing at times, especially for people who just hop in this car. I'll never, ever, ever valet this thing because they will probably stall it, they'll probably crash it, giving it way too much throttle, and a lot of bad things will happen. So if you're wondering if you could drive this car, sorry, probably not. We built this car to be a street car, a true, easygoing, nice cruiser daily driver. The car can run on E85 or pump gas. Let's see. I'll show you guys how responsive this is. This will go about, I'll go about half throttle right here. Woo! Painting 11s. This car does a good job of that. That was half throttle. Half throttle right there. So much fun. Talk about instant freaking power. Woo! I think I might have scared that car driving behind me. And now we'll go into fourth drive, converter locked. We're at 60 miles an hour, 2,100 RPMs. Cruiser. This car can sit in a drive-through, in and out all day long, not overheat, stay cool. There's a big cooler on the transmission. Good stuff. This car is a true street cruiser. Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I had a lot of fun filming it, making noise, burning some E85. Stay tuned for the next one. Cheers.